Hello, hello. Welcome. This is such an exciting soul art community event. I am so honored to be here with you. We are going to be officially opening the exhibit of Mellissae Lucia, Light in the Dark, the Luminous and the Liminal Shadows. So I'm very excited for you to experience this illuminating, inspirational, and insightful show. So I am Laura Hollick. I am the founder of Soul Art Studio and an artist myself and the curator for this show. And I wanted to bring this to our community because, I feel like we're in these times, transformational times, so much going on. The idea of light in the dark is very appealing, getting those glimmers of hope. Also, so we're going to be talking about that. Also, the idea of really in our community, the soul art community, we really explore ourself as art. And in the work that Melissa is going to be sharing with us today, this is a woman who has done over 70,000 sacred selfies. When I heard there was a woman who had done over 70,000 sacred selfies, I thought, wow, first of all, okay, there's another one who's on that path. But the amount of medicine and insight and embodiment that comes when you do that level of work is profound. And so I wanted to speak with her. So we're going to be sharing some of her work. And then Melissa is also going to be here. We're going to welcome her on in a minute. And her and I are going to be speaking artist to artist about art as a spiritual practice. And really, sacred selfies, why do we do that? What is that about? And what can we gain from that practice? We're also going to be looking at how to turn wounds into works of art and really exploring the light in the dark, especially now in these transformational times. We're going to look at, what is the future of art? Well, we'll see if that comes in. And also, what is the role of the artist and art in our society? So I would love to welcome on Mellissae Lucia, artist of Light in the Dark. Hello, Mellissae. Hello.
Hello, Ms. Laura.
So as we're going to be going into all kinds of conversation topics, different things, this exhibit, just to warm us up, Light in the Dark, the Luminous and the Liminal Shadows, what is this show about for you?
Having been a person that came into this world being very porous and what I say, merging between worlds, like being able to go to those mystery places and then come back to the earth plane into the body. The light and the dark to me is the merging of these worlds. It's the way that we're able to be out of duality, not so polarized, and recognize that everything weaves into each other. And so this show, when you and I were talking about it, it also feels like it's really essential at this time when the old paradigms are melting down, that we figure out how to navigate and hone the power that's available when we can navigate in the dark and find the radiance that's there for us.
Mm-hmm. And so I would love to just talk a little bit about how you got into this work. Well, actually, the idea of sacred selfies, both of us got into this before there was Instagram, before there were cell phone cameras, right? And so how did you get into exploring yourself as art?
I grew up in a family of artists, so there already was this expectation that you were going to explore the world in interesting ways, which that alone, I feel like it was such a blessing that my people expected you to be out of the box. Like they didn't want you in any box. And my parents wanted me to be a playmate, really. They're like, oh, you're here, so you better be interesting, like in a super good way. Like, let's bring it. And so since I was a child, my family loves, and I love photo booths, old school film photo booths. So photo booths and Polaroid cameras, those were some of the ways that you were able to fairly instantly get selfies back in the day, because, I was born in the 60s. So this is the 70s and the 80s. And so that was how initially was through photo booth pictures. And I just have always had this thing about sacred dress up, and sacred adornments and hats and scarves and masks and, makeup to a certain degree, but I would say more costume, but sacred costume. And so it really was initially the photo booths and then the Polaroids. And I was a punk rock hip hop kid. And so there was a part of me that had this huge amount of this grr in me. And I wanted to mirror that pack. Like, who are you? So that was how I started.
We actually have a photo of you, right? This is, okay, let's see if we can bring this up. Was this from the 80s, this photo?
Yeah.
Is that from the 80s? Okay. So this is like, is this a photo booth?
Yeah, that's photo booth. It might have been 1990, but I had just, I lived in Milan, Italy when I was a young woman as an au pair. And my whole life really changed going into such a different culture. And when I came home, this was me when I came home feeling really sassy and really empowered and really within myself. So that's a good one.
Very cool. So, well, while we're on this train of kind of like, where did you come from? Why don't we go into this a little bit, and then we'll show pieces that have emerged from this. So, starting to look at yourself, and something that, and I think back for myself too, when I started taking pictures of myself, I had a timer on my camera, and so it wasn't like I couldn't even see it right away. At least with like a photo booth, you can see it within a minute. Whereas now on cell phone cameras, you can look while you're even doing the picture and so on. But that journey was really a way to learn how to see myself. And I'm curious for you, when you started like that picture and starting to look, was it like finding yourself? Was it like inventing yourself? Was it like healing yourself? Why did you feel like you even wanted to do that?
I love that. Finding, inventing, healing. All of the above. And having come in again with this, I'm very, very empathic. Like I can feel things across the world. I'm one of those folks. And I imagine many of you here, even if you don't use that term, intuitives, creatives, we feel a lot and we feel very subtle things. And so I would really say I would take it back to when I was a little child and I was growing up in my German grandparents' home. And it was this time out of time warp place where it really was like a Grimm's fairy tale, magical, everything was alive. I'm an animist, so I do believe everything literally is alive. And so as a kid, and nobody knows to train us in the culture that we're in now and in the gene pool that I came through. Nobody does this anymore. Nobody goes, oh, she's one of those. We're going to start training her when she's a child. We don't get that. So we come in with the skill set and then nobody tells us what the F to do with the skill set. So I was moving through this environment, my grandparents' environment, and it was Grimm's fairy tale in that it was very challenging and it was very amazing at the same time. And I was looking for instructions. I was literally looking for the instructions I intuitively knew that I had this skill set it was really important to know how to navigate being so porous. But there weren't, the spirits gave me instructions, but how much that filtered into earth plane application, that's a whole nother matter. So I feel like the selfies were the evolution of this. I'm looking for instructions and information about the different facets of myself. Like somehow this is going to reveal what's actually hidden, but true.
Very interesting. And so when you look out and you see people doing selfies, now it's like a thing. It's just it's a common thing. Everyone's doing that. How do you translate that? Why do you think our culture is so into the selfie?
I think it's the same thing that I just said. I'm not sure that folks are aware of it, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. We have a culture that absolutely demands that we deny ourself authority, absolutely demands it. So I think, though, that people's souls, people's psyches have these base needs and these impulses to integrate and to become who you truly are. And so I think the modern selfie people, what they're doing is they're looking for these different facets of who they are, these different pieces of power and access to who they really are, but they don't know how to get there. They don't know how to do it because nobody teaches us. In fact, the opposite is taught. And I particularly, I would say anybody who's creative and intuitive has taken on a lot of messages that are not helpful. But I particularly work with women. I initiate women back into themselves. And women in this culture, there are so many messages. You and I talked a little bit about this the other day about giving up your authority, not having consent. So I feel like some of the folks are looking for this authentic sense of power and authority, and that somehow this mirroring back of who you are with the selfies, that this is going to reveal what they need. The instructions, back to the instructions.
Totally. Yeah. Well, when I think back for myself, when I started doing selfies, it was never for anyone else to see. It was for me to learn how to see myself, because I felt invisible in a way that, like, I never really felt like anyone saw me. I mean, they would see me in a room, like physically there's an object there, but I never really felt seen. And what I learned was what that meant to me. To be seen was to be kind of understood at a deeper level, like to have like my soul witnessed or understood, really. And so, yeah, it's amazing the things. And I do think that that is like a baseline soul need, that we need to have a reflection of what we are inside at a deeper level. And if we don't get that, if someone around us doesn't have the skill, because they themselves have never seen themselves, they don't know how to see another person, then as children, we're like starving for it. And I think as a culture, we're kind of starving for it, right? And so everyone's doing selfies. When I started doing it, it was considered narcissistic to do it. And so I was kind of hiding it in shame, but I had that need to do it. And yet didn't really want to put it out in the world, because then people, I felt like, would be very judgmental, like I'm so narcissistic or something. But I think that it is like a soul need. And so I want to get more into, like, there's so many layers that we can talk about. I'm so excited about all this. I want to show some of your art. Okay. We're going to talk more about your backstory, because there's a lot there. But I want to actually show some of your pieces to give a sense of, a selfie can be like you hold your camera up and like snap yourself with like, some monument behind you. Or, I mean, you can take it to like many, multi-dimensional level. So Melissa, you have done that. I want to show some of your pieces that are in this Light in the Dark exhibit. We're going to go through a couple of them, and then we'll pause on some and talk about them. And there's actually 12 pieces that throughout this time together that we're talking, we're going to look at 12 different pieces, but we're going to start off with just a few. So I'm going to have them come up, and just as we're going through this, I'm just going to hold it in silence so that the viewers, you're looking at this, just take a moment to take it in. Okay, so we're going to pause on this one. It's called Integration. And just first of all, I want to hear your thoughts on all of this, Melissa, but I'm just going to give a reflection as a viewer, and you've got an embodied experience. You're going to have a whole other level to share. But just as I am looking at these pieces, it's almost like they're in between worlds. It's like, how is light coming through these bodies? It's like illuminating the deeper cells coming through, and then the movements they're highlighted by light in a way. And it feels like a luminous body that's sort of illuminated by light. So that's something that comes through immediately. With this piece entitled Integration, Melissa, if you could just tell us a little bit about anything of what it means for you. And obviously these are you, all the pieces there of Mellissae. Could you speak a little bit about this piece?
Sure, absolutely. And we'll get into the backstory a little bit also of the initiation that ripped me open to be able to access this level of creative, what I call collaboration. I mean, it's, I've been thinking about Odin. This is part of the Oracle of Initiation deck. And so there's guardians with each of these. And I've been thinking about Odin and about how there is exchange for what you want in the world. That's how the world works. And if you want some of the really deep knowledge or wisdom like Odin wanted, it's a big exchange. And so with these, in a way, I feel like these are called the Painted Body series. These are down in graffiti tunnels in New Mexico. Is that there was this way that the photos were taken between the veils, that what I've said in my Oracle book is I became other, that this was not the selfies in the narcissism way, which I actually don't think self-portraiture is hardly ever narcissism. It occasionally can be, but this was this process of getting out of the way. And as I said, being very porous and seeing what the edges of reality that could be reached. Like, is it possible to bring down here to the earth plane what I feel and see and experience when I go to these liminal places? Is it possible to represent, to manifest, to channel this sort of energy so that we can be reminded who we really are? To me, I have the card here. This is what we really look like. Like, not everybody, everybody's intuition is different, but if you could read light bodies, we look like this. Like, we really are light. We really are energy. And so for me, this photo is Maeve. I don't know really how to say it in a really beautiful Celtic way, but she's the Celtic horse warrior, passionate goddess who's all about the wild woman energy, like unleashing the passion. And this is a very erotic photo. I mean, in a way, it's like it's bondage. It's it's light body bondage, light language. So it's this is who we all really are, and it reminds us of that in a very intuitive, instinctive way. So like when you look at this image, my experience has been like a portal opens. Like you look at the image and you go like, oh, that's who I am. There's the instructions. So that's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally. It's so incredible. I love hearing you speak about it. And I'm just seeing, Christine says, this is giving all new views of what selfies are. I always knew it was a reflection of people wanting to be seen, but not necessarily in the ways that you are talking about. I've always had questions to that effect. What are they wanting or needing in doing selfies? And then Christina says, I can relate to all being said and of feeling invisible and no one understanding my gifts. You know, I think like selfies touch a deep nerve in all of us, especially if we're doing them ourselves and seeing pictures of ourselves, right? And so in this context, Melissa, where you're showing an example of like, what does the light body look like, right? It's so fascinating. So let's go into this backstory. Like what cracked you open? Like how did this, like, yes, so in the 80s or 90s, you know, you're at a photo booth doing picture, you know, check out looking coy and sexy and cute. And then, you know, from that to, you know, these light bodies. Okay, so who is this person in this photo here?
And okay, by the way, one of my mentors said to me years ago, she said, you will never see so much light without a tremendous amount of darkness. And she was talking about me, but I'm talking about all of us. Back to Odin and the initiations, is there have been some very high costs that my soul has offered up to gain access and to become available to all of this. And so it's, and I also feel that people who are very creative have these really wide polarities. Like there's these impulses that come from these very wide different directions. And so some of my wide impulses is I have an absolute Martha Stewart side to me. I have a side to me that's really bougie, loves beautiful homes, and the energy of that. It's not the money stuff just because of the money. It's quality and beauty. Like it's the energy of a beautiful home. And I really wanted children when I was a young woman, so much. I was a nanny. I just loved children. And in my late 20s, I met this person who's in this picture, and my husband, Christopher. And I, there's this new age truth, and you can you hear a little bit of cynicism in me, truth, that you just magnetize who you are and where you're at. Not true. Not true at all. Sometimes the universe throws you something that
Mhm.
is a gift or a challenge that is just because it's your soul destiny, like it's your fate. And so Chris came to me, my husband Chris. And by the way, this is like an early, now that these days they're calling them awkward family portraits, which is on it, which I think about pass out like when I see some of them because they're so wonderful. So this was an early awkward family portrait that we were doing in a photo booth where we were going to do it as a Christmas card. But I met Chris when I was in my late 20s and really, really wanted a family and a happy home and children. And he was incredibly healthy. Like, in fact, I've met very few men that know how to love as openly as he did. Like he knew how to love. Like he was just good. Like I was like the super complicated, deep, soul. And he was just like good and loving. And he freaking loved me. I was like, whoa. I didn't totally know how to receive it then because I had a lot of healing to do. But he was this amazing miracle that came into my life. And I wanted children more than anything on the planet. I wanted to be a mom, stay-at-home mom, and all that good stuff. And then when he was 35, he came home one day. He'd been having some health issues, and he tells me that he has cancer. And he was 35. He seemed healthy. He climbed mountains, all the things. And we went into the underworld for 2 years. And so he was 37 when he died, and I was 33. And everything that I wanted in the world blew up, everything. And for a year, I wanted to die. Like I went into this liminal space of game over, you've taken too much. And my family's amazing. They are as amazing as they are wounded. And they're very complicated. Artists tend to be complicated. But it was like, okay, I had this childhood that already I have some wounds from. And then you take my chance at a happy home with this person that's so fabulous. Like, what the F? So it was about a year that I was in a liminal place and I didn't want to be here anymore. I was like, game over. Scotty, you can beam me back up because I'm done. I wasn't aggressively suicidal or anything. It was just like, I don't know why else I'm here because you took everything. You've now taken everything. And at the year anniversary, because I believe we all come down with contracts, and I believe I've had a contract to navigate light in the dark and bring that to the culture, I realized, wow, like this is this greatest privilege of my life that I've been given this body and this experience. And I felt like I was going to break Chris's heart on the other side. I was going to disrespect my own contracts. And even though I was mad at God or whatever you want to call God, I was like, but God still matters, like spirit still matters. And so at the year anniversary of his death, I basically had this talk with myself about, okay, you're dying. What do you do when you're dying and you want to resurrect yourself? Like, what do you do? So I sat with that because that's what you do. You sit and you listen and you wait. It doesn't always come in 2 minutes. And what came to me was, you need to feed the core aspects of yourself like you're dying. Like you're like literally this is life or death. And so then there was the sitting with, okay, what are the core aspects of myself? And it came that it's always been art. Like art is every cell in my body. Adventure, I love to explore. Nature has always been, I belong to the land. And then spirituality woven into it. And so we had some money. I had some money. And so I didn't need to do a job at that time. And so I went on a 7-year journey and ended up, that's where all of these otherworldly selfies came from, but it really was this catalyst of, okay, the worst thing that I can imagine just happened to me, but there has to be some reason out the other side for this, and I'm going to find it, and I'm going to claim it, and I'm going to live it, and I'm going to become the woman that I've always wanted to be.
Mm. So I want to show, first of all, I just kind of taking it all in, and it's amazing the things that do crack us open. Literally, it's almost like they can be those moments where we could just, feel like we want to leave the planet. We want to like end it because like it's that deep that the pain of it. And then those kinds of things, they can either like, take us out or call us in to what the path is. And so it, called you in. And so I want to share some other photos. So after your husband passed, it's like you kind of went into the underground, and like this image. So this image, is it actually like in a tunnel, or what is this?
That is so wonderful. So there was two bodies of work that happened. The first body of work that happened was the Earthen Body series. And that was a series where, and a little bit of a longer story, but it was connected to this horse ranch in Texas that I had moved to from Washington State. And this pelvis, you have that picture, but the pelvis
we can go to that too.
that looks like a bone.
Yeah.
And but so that photo, so I ended up taking 25,000, that one, 25, that kicked it off, 25,000 photos of myself nude, merging with nature, and basically being trained to trust that I would be safe, that there was this protective container, because there's a huge amount of things, particularly for women, about safety in a patriarchal culture. When we are seen as chattel and not having our own authority, you're not safe to a certain degree. And so through those 25, that was the culmination. So the bone mask was the beginning. This was the beginning. And then that in New Zealand, this Wahariki Medusa, that was like the wildness that had been reclaimed. But that picture that you asked about, it's in an irrigation water flume where it's raised up on wooden pillars, and it brings water from rivers into farmlands. And architecturally, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And then that rock was there. This was when I lived in Eastern Washington in Ellensburg. So that was me. I was very attuned to magical environments. So it's torn down now. They tore it down and it broke my heart. But but it looks like the underworld. It's totally the underworld.
It totally is. So, well, let's bring us back up on the screen so we can chat about. There's like so much. So that's like a backstory, and it's like a rich one. It's like really rich. And this idea of light in the dark, having that understanding of what you have lived through kind of gives it a whole other meaning. There's the poetic idea of, light in the dark, and you're a light body, and it's luminous and it's beautiful. And then there's the real experience where there can be something horrible going on, and to be able to find light within that. And I think that, right now in our culture, there's so many challenges. And, sometimes I wonder, is it because we do have some media, so we're exposed to them all? Were these challenges always there? Or then now there's just because we can see so many different people and cultures that we're like, oh, wow, there's so much? Or is there really like a lot of chaos going on? Either way, it can feel like a massively challenging and transformational time. And so the idea of light in the dark takes on another whole meaning when we start looking at it from that way. What could you say, having lived through something so painful and in a way life-threatening, right? Like anything you'd like to say to that about how did you find the light in the dark?
Well, it's back to, in some ways, this piece about paradox and duality, polarization. Something happened in Western culture at some point where there became this dualism, where the body and spirit was separate, and that there was, what I feel happened with that was this exile from the land, the exile from the cycles, the exile from the recognition that life is always a mix of the challenge and the gift. They don't exist separately, and everything has something that can be a gift and can help you grow. I'm not saying that it is something that almost feels like it kills you, but there is some invitation. Initiation is always an invitation, but it's in our culture with this polarization. I feel like some other cultures actually are not as polarized. I feel like the Western European, at some point, the Europeans said, we're going to separate, let's separate all this. And we're going to try to just have what we think is good, and we're going to shame and hide the bad. And nothing works like that. And so for me, what happened when I was younger, I had a lot of perfectionism, and out of the perfectionism was me trying to control the world because I was super overwhelmed and afraid because I was so porous and I was absorbing everybody else's unresolved issues. And so I'm like, I'm going to get super controlling about what I do and what I think and how I do things so that I'll try to be safe. Well, good luck on that one. And so as I got further into my spiritual path, what I realized was that the shadow, this piece where there are these pieces that, like you being called a narcissist for doing this process that was basically saving you as a teenager, like WTF. But this, there in the shadow, there is both these trauma. I would say a lot of it is inherited, though. There's the shame and these messages that we've inherited, but also in the shadow, what nobody talks about is there's the radiant shadow. There's this, that's where our real power lives. And, eroticism is woven into that. I feel like for adults, sex is like this place where you get to play with those edges, with consent and all those things. But it's, to me, the light and the dark is getting out of what we've been trained, what we've been indoctrinated into, which is, this is good, you'll be good this way, do these things and you'll be safe. And then what are your natural, real impulses? Who are you really? And not always shaming. Like, I'm very excitable, but I'm also very impatient. Like, patience was not the virtue I got in this lifetime. And so I've really worked to not shame it so much. Like, yeah, you're fucking impatient. Like, okay. Like, it's not, you're not killing people, you're impatient. Okay. And so to me, the light and the dark is about finding, reclaiming, and that's what I intuitively was doing with those, particularly. So the earth and body images were those ones where you saw where I was nude, and then the painted body are the ones that are more of those liminal light body ones. But I believe that's what I was intuitively trying to do, was after Chris had died and I didn't really know how to be with such a large loss of so many dreams, was like, okay, somehow you need to integrate parts of yourself that you haven't met, and you need power, access to power that you haven't known how to hold. But when you are able to be less polarized, your vessel, your conduit, your capabilities, your capacity grows. It's that sort of like that thing, you can only love someone else as much as you love yourself. Well, you can only be with as much complexity, and I would say messiness, with the world as you're able to be with inside of yourself. And so to me, it's an invitation into this really cohesive, integrated sense of self that doesn't shame things away and block things away. But I would love to hear your thoughts about that too. Now that I've rambled on, what's your thoughts?
Well, thank you for sharing all of that, and so many things. And I'm going to read a comment as well that's coming up. So Elika says, I relate to perfectionism as a way to create safety for myself by trying to control life. And so you spoke about this idea of, I think that that's one of the things of how we first can maybe learn about our power, right? Because like we have an energy, right? So like, what are we going to do with it? Okay, well, I can control. right? So like I can control this, I can try to create safety, I can like block this thing from happening. And it's like it's like the beginning of kind of learning how to work with the energy that we've got and what can we do with it. And I think something, you know, and we've spoken about this before, the idea of consent and with authority, and really until we have access to our power, how can we really give consent to kind of anything? Because who is the one giving consent,
Yes.
right? Like it's like we have to have access to our power. So I feel like the idea of light in the dark, it's finding ourself in a way, or that access to like what is true to us, what is our power, what is our light, you know, where do we come from? And yes, there's so many layers of complexity within all of that, and learning how to like bring our presence or our consciousness into all the things can coexist. And you spoke with the idea of like division, and it's such a dangerous, that to me, that's a dangerous place to be, because division in that way of thinking is separation consciousness, right? It's like thinking that everything is like separate. But if you look at nature and what creates health, it's ecosystem consciousness. And for ecosystem consciousness to exist within ourselves, multiple things can coexist, meaning you can be happy and you can be miserable really at the same time. I've certainly felt it, you know, like you can look outside and see a bird going by and like it kind of gives some hope. And you can also be like completely annoyed at your life and like what's going on with your career or what's happening in a relationship. You know, things can coexist. But in our culture, it's like they don't, it's sort of trying to label or sort of like understand it. So give it some definition, but then it creates a separation. Like, oh, well, if I'm always happy or I'm always positive, but what about this like negative part of me, or what about this? So yeah, like kind of bringing our wholeness into it. And that's why, you know, I love light in the dark. It's like they're actually like coexisting. And something that you shared earlier, that in order to, I don't remember the exact words, but the idea that like to know the light, you have to know the darkness. Like you can understand more light when there is the dark. And I think that there's something to that. I know in my own life, the times when I've had really dark times and felt so lost were my initiations into a discovery of the deeper layer of my own power, my own authority, my own understanding of my soul. So there's so much richness. And, you know, within these times that we're in, where there's a lot going on the planet, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of seemingly like chaos, and kind of like, how do, you know, if we're, you know, leaning on perfectionism, it's going to start feeling like, you know, the assembly line's going by and you can't, like, you know, that Lucille Ball thing, you can't get the things fast enough to like manage it. You can't control it. How can you control it? And there's in that uncertainty, you know, how to manage. So I want to get into stuff on that as well. I want to show a few more pieces so we can talk about this, and then like kind of look at the art and see how it's speaking to us. And all the pieces that we're showing, these are actually pieces that are in Melissae's Oracle deck, the Oracle of Initiation. So each piece, it has a title, which you'll see, but there's like a whole like Oracle understanding and story. So I'd like to show a few more pieces, and then we'll talk about a few more.
And remember, there's no Photoshop to these images. I think that's important to add, is that these images, they were taken with a camera, not a cell phone, but this is what happened in the process.
Mm-hmm. So and thank you for saying that, because especially now, given the fact that this could all have been generated by AI, right? This could all be generated in a context of, you know, maybe you didn't even have to be there, right? If you just look at it, the imagery, right? But these are embodied expressions,
Yes.
right? And I think that in itself is like interesting. Now, okay, this opens up a whole conversation in itself, because you're doing these pieces by yourself. Okay,
Yeah.
you're by yourself.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was speaking to like an art consultant, like I think it was like last year or whatever, and we were trying to figure out, how do I describe my own art at that time, that conversation. And the person said to me, she's like, oh, well, you're a performance artist. And I'm like, I'm a performance artist. There's nobody around when I'm doing these things. And it was just a very interesting, like I had to really think about that. What does that mean? So when you're doing your pieces, it is, you could look at it like performance art, but there's nobody there other than like the witness of spirit and the witness of the land and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so you're experiencing it. So there's layers to the art. There's your experience of it. Okay. The artist's experience. Then when we look at these pieces, us as a viewer, we have an experience of that. But then you created oracles and meaning to it. So you have kind of the externalized, you had an embodied experience, and then you're looking at it, you're getting messages from it. Like, what does it communicate? Kind of becoming the viewer yourself in a way. And so I want to bring that last piece up again. It was called Sovereign. Okay. And this piece, well, why don't we start with this? Anything that you would like to say or share insight about this piece called Sovereign?
Oh gosh. There were 70,000 images, as you said, 45,000 with the painted ones, and then 25,000 with the nudes that you saw that we showed earlier. And there was, this was sacred play. There was something that I had been studying with different mystical, whatever words you want to use, mysticism, shamanism, all that sort of stuff. I've been studying those ways to navigate the liminal spaces. And there was some like juice and depth that I wanted, some way that I wanted to like take it to the next level. But I didn't know how to get there. And so through this whole journey of Chris's death and moving to the horse ranch in rural Texas and finding the bone and the mask bone, and then having the epiphany. A lot of my work comes from epiphanies, literally like it's a shot of lightning that I see sort of this thing that I could do. And then I decide if I'm going to do it. But so I saw myself after I'd done those 25,000 nude sacred selfies, I saw myself ceremonially painted. And I found some graffiti tunnels at the same time, which to me is like the ancient, the griots and the bards and the storytellers. Like to me, hip hop is the contemporary storytelling and cultural defining information. But so when this process happened, it took that desire that I had, this depth of intensity, but sacred play, to a level that was what I really wanted and needed. There was a way of communion, of merging, the becoming other, where I would find these graffiti tunnels down outside of Santa Fe, and that certain colors and vibrations would speak to me. And then I would gather my bags of my horns and my amber. Some of this amber actually was in the photo. Amber and scarves and feathers and plants and everything. And I'd gather these things. I'd go down alone. And I felt safe now because I'd done the Earth and Body series. And then I would paint myself, and very imperfectly too. These are like, it's quite sloppy. It's like sloppy perfection. And so I'd paint myself and adorn myself. And then I just would go into it. Like I would go in. I believe my take is these are pictures taken between the worlds. They're like Nordic petroglyphs coming alive off cave walls, petroglyphs from all cultures. But there was a way and this is one of my absolute favorites. There's probably 5 of the images that are just like, for me, there's this power and love with them. This is one of them. And this one represents the Sami people of northern Scandinavia, are the indigenous European folks, and they were the deep power, magic, animist people. And so this is the Nawadi. The Nawadis are the Sami Scandinavians, shamans is the word that we can use. And so this image to me, like this is the other version of me. Like if you met me in the spirit world, this is what I look like right there. That's who the vulva, the Nordic witches, the vulvas. So So that's a really, to me, there's a level, and that word, there's a level of power there that's like, damn. So I love that one. I love it.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So what do you think is, okay, because we were talking about this idea, like the performance art, right? But nobody's there.
Yeah.
What is the role of the artist for yourself, your own self? But then in the context of like, you're doing these pieces, I'm guessing initially for yourself, and then there's a point where it's like, oh, I'm going to share it. So what is the role of the artist for the artist's self, but what is the role of the artist for society?
Two pieces to that. Artists go to places that not everybody else knows how to get there, is willing to go there, doesn't even want to go there. Nobody else is going to do 70,000 photos out in the desert. Nobody else is. I don't think you should. I did it. I did it for all of us. But that we do this, we go and do these things so that it will remind us what's possible. It will remind us who we really are. It will remind us of these truths and these powers and these spiritual laws that the culture doesn't teach us. The culture doesn't want to teach us. It wants to control us and have us buy things. And so to me, an artist is someone who somehow has a channel of access to some of this wisdom that's way beyond the artist, way beyond. This whole process, I take credit for being a killer channel. I am an outstanding channel. But this doesn't come from me. It didn't come from me. That's like source. That's power. And so artists have access to this channel of source and power and wisdom. And we, whatever, back to hip hop, whatever way that we're going to disseminate this information, we offer to people, these are the truths with a capital T, because there's a lot of lies out there now. So this is reminding us what's real. So there's that piece. And then I also feel like this was something that I kept thinking about. And when I knew you and I were going to talk, I was thinking about this other piece. The invitation that I think also is really important is that I believe everyone, and particularly women in a patriarchal culture where it still is that your looks, and like you should always be 29, that your looks are your main power in theory. You know, that's what the patriarchal culture says. And God forbid you didn't get put in the package that's the most valuable package. I mean, we could have 14 days of talking about body love and body with selfies and things. But my take is that also, and in this, if I could have access to all the young women, anybody under 25, and all of y'all at all ages, but anybody under 25, you have to cultivate things that are your own. You have to have things that are your own power, that are not determinant on anyone outside of you. No male gaze, cultural gaze, no external validation. You have to have intrinsic motivation towards something, because as you age, you have to have something that is a sense of authentic power that belongs to you. And so for me, and I would say for you too, the selfie journey particularly, that anchored in, and still I do it. Follow me on Instagram. I do sacred selfies all the time. It's always evolving because I want to push the edges of creativity. But I believe artists also, you don't have to be an artist, but there does have to be something that belongs to you, so that when you hit some of these thresholds, when the internal voices are going to be telling you you're losing power, you're becoming less valuable, you're in decline, you go, oh, hell no. Like, my power is growing because of whatever that thing is that you love that belongs to you. And I would suggest selfies is one of those things that can do it, that can belong only to you. You never have to show them to anyone else. It can be your journey. But as I've done it as the artist path, but whatever it is, find something that belongs to you and feed it.
Thank you for all of that. So amazing. And, kind of going back to that idea of, in the beginning, and then it also sounds like for you as well, these images, the first ones that I took anyways, were by myself. They were not for the gaze of somebody else, you know, and as things go on, then, you know, I can speak for myself, things developed to a way it's like I wanted to share, because like suddenly I'm filling up with the, you know, this inspiration and this kind of ideas. And so I'm like, oh, I want to share this. I want to share this. But you spoke about this idea of like having, like kind of getting to know your own power that isn't necessarily in context of how somebody else receives, or do they like this piece of art, or do they think that you look desirable, or, you know, just getting a relationship with your own power. That to me is what is timeless. And it has nothing to do with, you know, how old one is. It's like there's a timelessness, because really the soul is like timeless, right? Like having that connection to soul or the divine or God or whatever energy someone wants to use, or the name for that energy. Yeah. It's like that channel for that is timeless. Right. And when we cultivate a relationship with it in whatever way we do. So both you and I, we have gone the route of kind of using ourselves as art, being that channel, and then having a reflection in an image within that exploration. And so that kind of brings up another thing about like the image, right? So that's one of the things in the patriarchal culture, society, belief system is like what something looks like kind of determines its value. And then here we are, you know, we're talking about that, challenging those ideas, but at the same time, using an image to have that exploration. And now that we've got AI and images are being really, like someone could create like an entire body of, say, paintings in 10 seconds with AI. You know, they can say, okay, I like this color. And then, you know, can you make me a series of paintings? Literally a series of paintings could come out like in seconds, which could have taken an artist years to develop and work on that. And so the idea of the image, I think, is changing just because of that. It allows us to have a different conversation about the value of an image. So just in all of that, okay, there's lots of things that we can go into on it, but in all of that, what do you think is the future of art? Right? Like, is it for ourselves? Is it for someone else to look at? Is it for a community experience? Is it to reveal insights for the culture? You know, is it so that, you know, we can use our creativity to communicate with AI and it gives us an image back? You know, it just in your own, and it's not formed yet. You know, it's not like there is one answer, right? But just kind of starting to open that up. What do you feel is the future of art?
Wow. That's amazing question. I would say, and back to this, you know, it's funny that funny or not funny or whatever, but that they said you were a performance artist,
Yes, yeah.
which has certain connotations. You know, there's the art world has all sorts of boxes about what's this and what's that and more valuable and less valuable. But to me, having gone, and totally you as well, the spirituality woven in with the art, like there is no separation. And I would say that art has at its heart spirituality, even if people don't want to use that word, that word is triggering. But I'm really curious and interested in about how art becomes something that's a way of life. That's a way that we move through the world, because really the only true power that we have is trusting our instincts. It's trusting our intuition and then navigating the world through that. So to me, that's what art is, an apprenticeship to that. And it's how you I call it the dialogue of delight. Again, back to being an animist. Animist believes that the world is alive, that everything is alive and animate on some level. And that's, you know, shamanism and mysticism and all of that, but that you can engage. So these dialogues of delight, for me, I move through the world with this dialogue with everything. And partially, sometimes it's visual, you know, it's like, oh, that's beautiful, or that's strange, or that's, because I'm a surrealist too and a Dadaist, but there is this way that the world wants to play with us, has been my experience. I call it expecting enchantment. And if you expect that the world wants to play with you, it's like you're looking around for, and this is like trees waving at you and stuff, you know, this This is very mystical. But to me, being an artist is moving through the world, being part of the world, and being in this reciprocal relationship with the world in a way that brings us some beauty in the darkness, because life is always going to have something that's difficult. That's just what the earth plane experience seems to be. I mean, there is, even if we're getting away from duality, that is what happens, is things slam against each other. That's why it's interesting down here. But I don't feel like enough adults give themselves permission to have pleasure, to have real presence, to have play. And so to me, the future of art would be, this is how we interface with our lives and our world. And that there's a lot more nourishment and feeding of the joy and the passion. And for me, having fed this for so many years, also what you get to when you become magnetic, with this joy and this passion. Like, other people want to play, they're like, oh, there's something going on over there. Like, they can feel your radiance, they feel your light. And then here's the payoff of all of it: you get other cool people to play with. And that's the bottom line to me, is I've survived my life because of my amazing friends and my playmates. And I literally have the coolest people, and more cool people will come in. I mean, that's how it works. But so to me, the future of art really is becoming radiant, and magnetizing others, and then playing with that energy. And like you and I today, this right here, you and I met each other. I didn't know you before. We had some amazing conversations. And I go, oh, she's my person. Like, we have so many similarities. And so then you and I play together. Now we play together. So that to me is the future of art, is how do we expect enchantment and then trust ourselves and give ourselves permission to play.
Yep.
What about you, though? You have some amazing thoughts about this.
I want to just take that in for right now. And it feels like, it just could open up, like, a whole, like, all these different doors of conversation and all of that. It's amazing, though, and just so exciting. So what I want to do, though, I want to let everybody know that the exhibit for Light in the Dark, there are actually 12 pieces that are featured in that. We got to, I believe, 9 today, but there are 3 more that you have not seen yet. And there is a page that shows all of the pieces and sort of like descriptions and so on. And I'm going to put the link up there so you can check that out. Okay. So that's where you can see the full exhibit. Also on that page, Melissa, you have a beautiful, generous gift that is available for people about self-portraiture as a spiritual practice. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just a beginning, sort of a primer to jump into. I call them sometimes also subversively sacred selfies, because again, everything that you and I've talked about, like, this is claiming your power and mirroring and witnessing yourself to yourself. This is a camera. When I do this, is camera, but
I got it. Yes.
The phone. Did you get it? That's the phone instead of this being the phone. But so the gift is just, it's really a basic outline of some of the things that you would want to think about to open yourself up to doing this process. And I love photos, clearly. There's lots more fun photos and examples so that you can be inspired. And I hope that you enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. So there is a link for you to get that. It's on the exhibit page, so you can check that out, solarstudio.com/Mellissae. And it feels like an initiation in itself. So as there's lots that's landing for me, as I'm sure for you and for all of us, just like that's like creative energy is like bubbling and sparking and so on. So it's just like letting those pieces land. Any final thoughts, Melissa, that you want to share? Anything that's bubbling up or sparking, illuminating for you in this moment that you would like to, any final thoughts for today?
It's when you and I first, right before we went live, you and I checked in and, we grounded and connected together. And that what came through that we talked about for a minute is social media is a real mixed bag. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of illusion, there's a lot of lies. Like social media is very complicated. And it's an amazing way to meet other people and to connect and share information and really help each other transform. And so when I was talking to you, Laura, what I had before we started was, this is this amazing privilege that we have and power to be able to have, and thank you, Kevin, to be able to have the tech to do this. And people, so the first people were from Denmark and from South Africa that I saw that people around the world were connecting with each other and talking about these amazing things. So I just want to really honor the privilege of this reach that we have and the privilege of all of the work, Laura, that you've done with your amazing soul art community. This is a huge privilege, and we should not take this for granted. And let's bond together, because when you and I first talked about this, we talked about this as a movement, that this is something to invite other people into as women and anyone, creatives, who use your body as your primary vessel of transformation. And that this is the way that we're really going to have enlightenment in our bodies, is through the body. So I just want to honor the privilege of this conversation and this reach, and everyone who will see this experience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. So true. Absolutely. It is such an honor to connect and to feel the circulation.
Yeah.
It's like that's to me like the ecosystem consciousness, like getting the circulation on these ideas and connecting with each other, and also recognizing in each other that, everyone's got their challenges, and everyone also has capacity to connect to, their source of power, right? Like, and hearing those stories, seeing those reflections, seeing how someone's doing it, it's like it starts to, build up that sense of what's possible. And that is such an honor to witness and be part of. So I'm so grateful and so excited about all of it. Definitely check out the exhibit page, and there's that link there. You can get that, free guided journey there with Mellissae around the self-portraiture, and really learn how Mellissae has done this and used this type of an art form as a way of cultivating your relationship with yourself and your power. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Kevin's doing our technology here at Solar Art Studio.
Hey, Kevin.
Awesome. All right. I'm just sending you all so much love. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of love to you, Mellissae. Thank you for sharing with us today.